I still remember the sound of the wind that used to hum through the cracks of the cedar walls. The same wind that carried my laughter when my boy took his first steps. The same wind that whistled through the orchard as I watched him run barefoot, chasing dragonflies with his tiny hands outstretched. That house wasn't just made of wood and stone. It was made of my life. Every plank carried my years. Every nail carried a prayer I whispered when things were hard. My husband and I built it together with our hands, our sweat, our love. We didn't have much, but we had that home, and for us, that was everything. My name is Maya Wabanang, and I have lived long enough to see every season twice, and to feel love bloom and rot like an apple left too long on the branch. I raised my son, Eli, in that home, in a world that often forgot us. His father died when Eli was just 12. I remember that day, the rain pouring like grief from the sky, Eli standing beside the coffin, not crying, just clenching his jaw the way his father did when he was angry. I placed my hand on his shoulder and said, "You must be strong, my boy." He nodded, but he didn't look at me. From that day, something between us began to shift. Still, we lived. We survived. The house held us together. It was where we cooked venison stew on the old stove, where the smell of pine and earth drifted in through the window every morning. It was where I taught him our stories, our prayers, our language, though he often rolled his eyes and said, "Ma, those old words don't mean anything anymore." I'd smile, but inside my heart would ache. I knew those words were all I had left of my mother, my people. When Eli left for the city, I wasn't surprised. He wanted more than the mountains could offer, more than the river and its songs. He said he'd come back every month. At first, he did, each visit shorter than the last. Then came the calls, fewer and fewer. But that's what happens, isn't it? Children grow up and they forget the soil that raised them. Years passed, and my hands began to shake. My knees grew weak. Still, I took care of the home. I swept the porch every morning, even when the frost bit my fingers. I kept the fire alive, just in case he ever came home cold or lost. I believed he would. I always believed. Then one morning, I heard a car pull up the dirt road. Eli stepped out in a suit that looked too expensive for a man who once chased fireflies barefoot. Behind him came a woman, his wife, Lila. She wore heels that sank into the mud and looked around like she'd stepped into a place that didn't deserve her. I smiled and hugged her anyway. I thought, if she loves my boy, she must be good. But I was wrong. She didn't look at the walls, the orchard, or the mountains. She just wrinkled her nose and whispered something to him. I caught only one word. Outdated. I pretended not to hear. I made tea and biscuits and tried to tell her about the old oak tree that shaded the house, how my husband carved our initials into its bark the summer before we married. She smiled politely, but her eyes were cold, empty. A week later, Eli said he had to handle some paperwork in town. He didn't tell me what for. I didn't ask. I trusted him. I always did. But sometimes trust blinds you. One afternoon, a man I didn't know came by, holding a clipboard. He asked if I was the previous owner. My heart stopped. I laughed, thinking it must be a mistake. I'd lived here for 50 years. "No," I told him. "I'm the only owner this house ever had." He frowned and said quietly, "Ma'am, the property has been sold." For a moment, the world stopped moving. The wind, the trees, the birds, everything went still. I stared at the man, but I could barely hear him. All I could feel was the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. My son sold our family home, without telling me. I stood on that porch as the sun began to set, my hands trembling, my breath short. The shadows grew long across the yard. Every corner of that house whispered memories, the laughter, the prayers, the warmth, and now it all belonged to someone else. My son had sold my life for money. And for what? A house in the city? A wife's approval? A promise of comfort that didn't include me? I sat down on the steps, clutching the edge of my shawl. The wind rose again, whistling through the cracks of the cedar walls, carrying a voice I swore was my husband's. "You built this, Maya," it seemed to say, "but even homes can be betrayed." I looked out toward the fading light and asked myself, how can a mother lose her son when he's still alive? I didn't sleep that night, not even for a breath. The house groaned under the weight of the wind, and every sound felt like it was mourning with me. I sat by the fire, the same place where Eli once built his little forts out of blankets, pretending to be a hunter. I could almost hear his voice again, that sweet boy's laughter echoing in the corners of my mind. But when I closed my eyes, all I saw was his face as a man, cold, tired, distant. When the dawn came, I made coffee the way I always did. Boiled water over the wood stove, 2 spoons of grounds, no sugar. I waited for the sound of his car door, for his footsteps coming up the porch. I thought maybe he'd explain. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. By noon, he came. He didn't look me in the eyes at first. He just stood by the doorway, hands in his pockets, that nervous twitch in his jaw I knew too well. I looked at him, my son, my only child, and I asked, "Eli, tell me this isn't true." He didn't answer. My voice trembled when I spoke again. "Tell me you didn't sell our home, son. Tell me this isn't how it ends." He looked away and said so quietly I almost missed it, "It's just a house, Ma. Just a house." Those words cut through me like a blade. My knees gave way and I sat back down on the chair. "Just a house," I whispered. "You were born in this house. You learned to walk on these floors. Your father's hands built this porch." He sighed, that heavy city sigh that people make when they're done listening. "You'll understand one day," he said. "You can move in with us in the city. Lila already found a place for you. It's nice, modern. Modern. Another word for lonely, for hollow, for nothing." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. Old women don't yell. We break quietly. I just nodded, and he walked away. When I heard the car drive off, I sat in that empty kitchen until the sun dipped behind the hills. The light through the window turned orange, and I thought, maybe that's what dying feels like. Not sudden, just fading, one beam at a time. Days passed, and strangers began to walk through my yard, measuring, pointing, taking notes. They didn't see me as a person, just a woman in the way. I tried to keep busy, sweeping, watering the flowers, whispering to the old walls, telling them thank you for holding me so long. But at night I'd sit in the dark and whisper to the silence, asking it questions that never came back with answers. When the papers finally came, the eviction notice with my name printed in bold black letters, I pressed my thumb against it, tracing the ink. 50 years, reduced to one sheet of paper. My whole life, signed away by the one I loved most. I packed slowly. Each drawer was a wound reopening. The kitchen smelled like coffee and grief. I touched the wooden spoon my husband carved for me on our first anniversary and felt tears burn behind my eyes. I wrapped it in cloth, even though I knew there'd be no place for it where I was going. The last thing I packed was a photograph. Eli at 5, grinning, mud on his face, missing a tooth. I held it close and whispered, "Where did you go, my boy? Where did you go?" The morning I left, I walked through the orchard one last time. The apples were just beginning to ripen. The old oak tree still had our initials, M+T, carved deep in its bark. I pressed my palm against it and closed my eyes. For a moment, I thought I heard my husband's laugh in the rustle of the leaves. I whispered, "He sold it, love. He sold what we built." A single apple dropped beside my feet. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was the trees' goodbye. When the truck came to take my things, I didn't look back at the house right away. I couldn't. I stood by the gate and waited for the strength to turn around, and when I finally did, I saw her, Lila, standing by the door, her hands on her hips, already giving instructions to the men who'd come to paint over the past. She looked at me like I was something she'd outgrown, like I was a coat she didn't need anymore. I wanted to say something sharp, something to make her remember that I was the reason she had a husband who worked hard, who knew love once. But instead, I just said, "Take care of my son." She nodded, not out of respect, but to end the conversation. When I got in the truck, the driver asked, "You okay, ma'am?" I smiled. "I'm old," I said. "That's what we say when we mean we're broken." As the road turned, I caught one last glimpse of the roof line. The smoke from the chimney curled into the sky, and for a heartbeat it felt like the house was waving goodbye. I pressed my fingers to my lips and whispered, "Thank you." That night, in the small apartment Eli found for me in the city, I couldn't sleep. The hum of the traffic replaced the sound of crickets. The walls were white and empty. No wood smell, no mountain air, just the distant sound of cars and strangers. I sat by the window watching the lights flicker, and I wondered, when did we start trading love for comfort? He called the next morning. "How's the new place, Ma?" he asked. I said, "It's fine." But the truth sat heavy in my chest. Nothing was fine. After we hung up, I looked at the packed boxes stacked against the wall and realized he hadn't even asked if I missed home. I whispered into the quiet, "You can buy houses, Eli, but you can't buy history." Sometimes I think of asking him why he did it, why he didn't tell me, why money felt more important than memory. But then I remember, people don't always break your heart because they want to. Sometimes they do it because they've forgotten how not to. And that's what hurts the most. Tell me something, my dear. Do you think love can ever survive when respect is gone? The city never truly sleeps. Even in the quiet hours when the moon sits heavy on the sky, the streets hum like a restless child. I'd sit by the window, the same spot every night, watching the glow of headlights trace across the curtains. It wasn't the light that hurt me. It was the sound, the constant reminder that life was rushing by without me. In the beginning, Eli and Lila would visit once a week. They'd bring takeout, a few flowers, talk about work and traffic, and then leave before the tea even cooled. I'd smile through it all. Smile because that's what mothers do, even when they know the smile is the last thing keeping them from crying. One evening, Lila looked around my apartment, wrinkled her nose, and said, "You should get rid of some of this old stuff, Mama Maya. It makes the place feel dated." Dated. She said it so casually, like she was talking about a shirt, not the small bits of my life that still kept me breathing. I looked at her, then at Eli. He was staring at his phone, nodding like he didn't even hear her. I wanted to tell her that each thing in that apartment was a heartbeat. The worn rug. My husband gave it to me after our first winter. The cracked lamp. Eli broke it when he was 6, chasing a puppy through the house. The quilt, stitched from the dresses I wore in my youth. Every piece had a soul, but they didn't see that. To them, it was clutter. After they left, I sat in silence for a long time. I could still smell her perfume in the air, too sharp, too clean. It didn't belong to warmth, it belonged to something plastic. I stood up, ran my fingers along the edge of the table and whispered, "You can clean a house till it shines, but if you wipe away the memories, what's left to live for?" Weeks passed, and their visits grew shorter. Then they stopped altogether. At first there were excuses, work, travel, a new project. I told myself it was just life getting busy. But deep down, I knew. I was becoming an afterthought. The phone calls became fewer, too. Sometimes I'd pick up the receiver just to hear the dial tone. That hollow hum was my only companion. One night I couldn't sleep. I turned on the small radio by my bed, the one that still played old songs. And when I heard a tune from my wedding day, I closed my eyes. The tears came without sound, just slow, warm trails down my face. I remembered the way my husband used to hold me when we danced, gentle but sure, as if I might drift away if he didn't keep me close. He used to say, "If love is real, it doesn't fade, Maya. It only grows roots." Roots. That word stayed with me, because roots don't just grow in the ground. They grow in people. They hold us, even when the soil around us changes. But when someone cuts them, when your own child cuts them, you start to drift like a leaf with nowhere to land. I wondered if maybe I had done something wrong. Had I made him feel small? Had I made him ashamed of where he came from? Was that why he wanted to erase it all? The house, the stories, the old traditions. One Sunday morning, I tried calling him. It went to voicemail. I left a message, soft and simple. "It's your mama, Eli. Just wanted to hear your voice. I miss you." He never called back. That week I saw him on the news. There he was, my boy standing in a sharp suit, shaking hands with someone important. The headline said, "Local developer expands project in Homeland County." Homeland County. That was where our house once stood, where my apple trees had bloomed, where my husband's ashes rested beneath the soil. My chest tightened. I turned off the television and sat still, the silence deafening. My own son had built over the land that raised him. He hadn't just sold it, he buried it under concrete. I went to bed that night, but my heart didn't rest. It felt like something inside me had gone missing, like the echo of a lullaby with no melody left. The next morning I went for a walk. My knees ached, my hands trembled, but I walked anyway. I found a park bench and sat there for a long while, watching children play. One little girl fell and scraped her knee. Her mother rushed over, scooped her up, kissed her forehead, whispered something, and the child smiled again through tears. That small moment broke me open. Because that's what motherhood is, isn't it? We heal with words. We mend with love. We give everything. And still, sometimes, we end up alone. A woman sat beside me on the bench. She must have been near my age. We didn't talk for a while. Then she looked at me and said, "You look like you're waiting for someone." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." She nodded, as if she understood. "We all wait for someone," she said softly, "even when they've already left." That night, I wrote Eli a letter. My hands shook as I held the pen, but I wrote anyway. I told him about the house, about his father, about the apples that still bloom even when no one picks them. I told him I loved him, that I always would. I didn't send it. I couldn't. Some letters are meant to be written, not mailed. They're just another way to say goodbye without really saying it. As I placed the letter inside my Bible, between the worn pages of Psalms, I whispered, "Maybe one day you'll read this, my boy. Maybe then you'll remember who you were." Sometimes I think about that day he called our home just a house. I wonder if he ever looks back and realizes it wasn't a house he sold. It was me. And when I look around this small apartment, with its cold walls and dim light, I can't help but ask myself, how does love turn into something that looks so much like abandonment? The next week, I made up my mind. My bones protested. My breath came short, but something inside me pushed. That old mother's instinct that refuses to die no matter how long the silence stretches. I packed a small bag, folded my shawl, and took the early bus toward the city. I hadn't been there in years. It was louder than I remembered, taller too. The buildings like glass mountains, cold and shining. I clutched my purse to my chest and whispered a prayer under my breath. Just let me see him, Lord. Just once. Eli's office was easy to find. His name was on a silver plaque beside the glass doors. Eli Wabanang and Associates. My fingers traced the letters. Pride and pain twisted together inside me. My boy's name, polished for the world to see, yet somehow no longer belonging to me. The receptionist looked up when I entered. Young girl, neat bun, red lipstick too bright for her soft face. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she asked. "Yes, dear," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I'm here to see Mr. Wabanang. I'm his mother." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, the way people do when they're surprised but trying to hide it. "Do you have an appointment?" I smiled faintly. "No, but he'll want to see me." She hesitated, picked up the phone, murmured something I couldn't quite hear. Then she looked up again. "He's in a meeting, ma'am. I'm afraid you'll have to wait." So I waited. The minutes stretched like hours. I watched people walk in and out, laughing, carrying coffee, clicking their heels on the polished floor. All of them looked so alive, so busy. And there I sat, a shadow from another time, clutching a shawl that smelled of old roses and rain. When Eli finally appeared, my breath caught. He looked tired, thinner but sharp, the suit crisp, hair slicked back, confidence radiating from him like heat. I stood slowly. "Eli," I whispered, smiling. He froze when he saw me. "Mom?" I nodded, heart trembling. "I came to see you, son. It's been so long." His eyes darted toward his co-workers, then back to me. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly, lips tight. "You could have called." "I did," I replied softly. "You never answered." He sighed, rubbed his temples. "Mom, this isn't a good time. I've got a full schedule today." Something inside me cracked then. I looked at him, my own flesh, my own heartbeat, and saw a stranger wrapped in silk. "It's never a good time anymore, is it?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He shifted, uncomfortable. "Please, don't do this here." I wanted to tell him everything I'd been carrying, the nights alone, the silence, the ache of losing our home. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, the way mothers do when they're breaking. "I just wanted to see your face," I said. "To know you're all right." He nodded stiffly. "I'm fine, really." There was a pause. Then I said quietly, "I saw the news, Eli, about the land." His expression hardened. "Business, Mom, just business." "Business?" My voice shook. "That land held your father's ashes, our roots, our memories. You built over it like it was nothing." He sighed again, this time with irritation. "You don't understand how things work now. We needed the deal. It's progress." Progress. That word echoed in my ears like a cruel bell. "You call it progress," I said slowly, "but all I see is erasure." He frowned, glancing at the people watching from behind their desks. "Please, Mom, don't make a scene." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Don't worry, son. I won't embarrass you. I already know I don't belong here." And with that, I turned and walked out. The street outside blurred before my eyes, cars rushing past, horns wailing. I found a quiet corner by a cafe and sank onto a bench. My hands trembled as I reached for the shawl in my bag, wrapping it around my shoulders. It still smelled faintly of home. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, watching the world move without me. A young man walked by, offering me a kind smile. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked. I nodded. "Just a little lost." He chuckled softly. "Aren't we all?" Then he walked on, disappearing into the tide of strangers. When evening came, I took the bus back home. The ride was long, the city lights fading behind me like dying stars. At one stop, an old couple boarded, holding hands, whispering to each other. I watched them, and my chest tightened with something sharp and familiar. By the time I reached my apartment, the world was dark. I boiled a kettle, poured myself some tea, and sat by the window again, The moon hung low and full, silver spilling through the glass. I thought about Eli as a child, how he used to run to me after falling, arms open, tears streaming. He'd press his small face against my neck and say, "Mama, don't let go." I never did, not once. And yet here I was, holding on to a memory that had long since let go of me. Days passed, weeks, silence again. Then one morning there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a courier holding a brown envelope. "Delivery for Ms. Wabanang," he said. I signed, closed the door, and opened it carefully. Inside was a check, large enough to cover years of rent, and a note in my son's handwriting. "For your comfort. Don't worry about the past. Love, Eli. Love." That word stung worse than any insult, because love without presence isn't love at all. It's charity wrapped in guilt. I tore the check in half, then again, until it was nothing but confetti of what once could have been forgiveness. That night, I wrote another letter. This one, not to him, but to myself. "You have done enough, Maya," I wrote. "You have loved, even when it hurt. You have forgiven, even when they didn't ask. Now it's time to stop waiting for apologies that will never come." I folded the paper neatly, tucked it under the candle by my bed, and let the flame flicker until it burned low. The next morning I took a walk to the river. The same river that had once kissed the edge of our land before they covered it with stone. I stood there, watching the water rush past, fast and wild, and whispered to the current, "Take my sorrow with you." A breeze stirred the leaves, soft and cool against my face. For a moment I thought I heard my husband's voice, not in words, but in the quiet between them. I sat on the riverbank for hours, letting memories come and go like ripples. Then I realized something. Love doesn't die when people leave. It only changes shape. It becomes the air you breathe, the ache that teaches you to keep living. I went home lighter that day. Not healed, no, that's too neat a word, but emptied of the anger that had lived in me too long. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. When children grow so far from their roots that they can no longer see where they came from, who is to blame? The world that pulls them away, or the mother who never learned to let go? The years that followed passed like quiet rain. Soft at first, then endless. My hair turned white. My hands became maps of time, and the mirror stopped showing the woman I used to be. But I still woke every morning before sunrise, brewed tea, and whispered my husband's name to the empty air, as though the sound alone could keep me anchored. I had long stopped waiting for Eli to come. Hope, you see, is a kind of hunger. It eats you slowly when there's nothing left to feed it, and I had been starving for too long. The city had changed again. New buildings, new faces, same rush. I stayed on the edge of it all, in my small apartment that smelled of old paper and mint leaves. The landlord's children had grown. They brought me soup sometimes, or flowers when the weather turned cold. It was enough, that small kindness from strangers who remembered I was still here. One late afternoon, as I was watering my plants, I noticed a letter slipped under the door. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. My heart gave a little jump. I picked it up, sat by the window, and opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a short note. The ink was smudged in places, as if the writer had hesitated many times before finishing. "Dear Mrs. Wabanang, I hope this letter finds you in peace. I know I have no right to write to you, but I must. Eli is not well. He has been carrying a sickness in silence for months now, something the doctors say cannot be undone. He talks little, eats less, and sometimes I catch him staring at the old photograph of you he keeps in his drawer. He doesn't know I found it. I think he misses you, but he doesn't know how to say it. He never did learn that part. Please forgive him if you can. He wanted to be strong, but strength turned him hard instead. Lila Wabanang." I sat there for a long time, reading the letter over and over until the words blurred. Lila, his wife, the woman who had once looked at me like I was beneath her, too simple, too small town, too rooted in the past. The same woman who had called my cooking old-fashioned, my clothes outdated, my accent too heavy. And now she was writing to me, asking for forgiveness. I folded the letter carefully and held it to my chest. The ache I thought had quieted began to stir again, not sharp this time, but deep, like an old wound remembering the knife. The next morning, I took the bus again. My hands trembled the whole way, and I prayed the driver wouldn't notice the tears gathering in the corners of my eyes. The hospital was white and cold, the kind of place where even breathing feels like an intrusion. I asked the nurse for Eli's room. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. His face had thinned, his eyes hollowed out, but when he saw me, his lips parted slightly. "Mom," he whispered. I walked closer, each step heavier than the last. "I got your wife's letter," I said softly. He blinked slowly, a faint smile trembling on his lips. "I didn't think she'd send it." "I'm glad she did," I whispered. He looked at me for a long time. No pride, no distance, just a boy seeing his mother again after too many years lost to pride. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking, "for everything." I reached out, touched his cheek. "Hush now," I said gently. "You don't owe me words. I already forgave you long before you asked." His eyes filled. "I was trying to forget her," he murmured suddenly, gaze unfocused. I frowned. "Forget who?" He swallowed hard. "The one I loved before Lila. I thought marrying her would make it go away. But it never did. It only made me smaller. I became someone I didn't recognize. Cold, proud, cruel. And you reminded me of everything I'd buried. That's why I stayed away. It wasn't your fault, Mom. It was mine." I sat there, silent, the truth falling between us like a confession years too late. I brushed a hand through his hair. "We all try to bury pain, Eli," I said quietly. "But it always finds a way back. Sometimes through dreams, sometimes through silence." He closed his eyes, tears slipping down his temple. "Do you think she forgave me too?" I smiled faintly, though my throat burned. "I think she did, son. Some people love us even after we stop deserving it." He nodded weakly. Then he whispered, "I wish I could start again." I kissed his forehead, feeling the chill of his skin. "Then start with peace," I said. "You don't have to go with regret." We sat in quiet for a long time after that. No sound but the steady beep of the machine beside him and the soft hum of life slipping gently away. When his breathing slowed, I held his hand tighter, whispering the same words I had spoken when he was a child. "Mama's here. Don't be afraid. Just rest, my boy." And he did. He left the world with his hand still in mine, the same way he came into it. I stayed until the nurse came in, until they gently covered his face and told me it was time. I nodded, stood, and walked out slowly, the hallway stretching before me like a dream I couldn't quite wake from. Outside, the sun had just begun to set. I sat on the hospital bench watching the sky bleed orange into purple. Lila came out a few minutes later, her face streaked with tears. For the first time, she didn't look proud or distant. She looked human. She sat beside me without speaking. After a while, she said, "He loved you, you know. He just didn't know how to show it." I nodded. "I know." We sat in silence until the wind picked up. Then she took my hand. "I'm sorry for the things I said, the way I treated you." I squeezed her fingers gently. "You were young, and love makes fools of us all." She began to cry again. I let her. Sometimes silence heals more than words. That night, when I returned home, I lit a candle by the window and placed Eli's letter beside it. The flame flickered gently, casting small waves of gold across the walls. I whispered, You're free now, my boy. Be kind to yourself in the next world. I sat there for a long while, letting the quiet settle around me. Then I smiled through my tears, because somehow, even in the ending, there was peace. Not perfect, just enough. And now, as I share this story with you, I wonder, how many of us carry love that was never meant to heal, only to remind us? If this story touched something inside you, if you've ever loved someone who couldn't love you back the same way, share it. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Please subscribe and share, not for me, but for every heart still waiting to be understood.